I suspect that people will keep joining, but I might start anyway. It's interesting to see where people have joined us from around the world. Thank you so much for coming today to the ebook SOS campaign update. This is an event sponsored by SLA Europe, and so we're really pleased to have you all here. My name's Carol Hollier, and I'm a volunteer on the SLA Europe Events Committee, and I'd like to introduce our panelists today who are going to give us the campaign update. So we have two librarians here. We have Caroline Ball, who is from the University of Derby, where she is the academic librarian for business, law, and social sciences. And she is also a Wikipedian and actually serves on the Wikimedia UK Board of Trustees. And she's worked as a copyright and licensing advisor as well as a lecturer in publishing. And then we also have Rachel Bickley today, and she's a senior academic liaison librarian at the London Metropolitan University. And she has worked at other universities around the UK as an academic librarian, and she works around education and access at London Met University, including the development of the university's Education for Social Justice framework. So we're so pleased to have you here to give us this update on this incredibly important campaign. And I will hand over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carol. Yes, the whole thing about handing over transitions, we've been practicing that just because we have to kind of request control and then hand back control. So if there is a few delays sometimes between us swapping over slides, we do apologize. We're just basically fighting for control in the background. So yeah, my name is Caroline Ball, and I am one of the organisers of the ebook SOS campaign alongside Rachel. And this campaign was really, kind of kick-started by our colleague Johanna Anderson from the University of Gloucestershire, who unfortunately was due to be presenting with us today, but isn't very well. So we are kind of taking up the baton in her place, but we definitely wish Johanna a speedy recovery, because she's probably lying on a sofa feeling very sorry for herself at the moment. So what we're here today is basically to give you not just an update of the ebook SOS campaign, but a little bit of an explanation really of how it came about, how it has evolved, and where we're going to next. And I think Rachel will probably agree with me that it has definitely evolved since we first started with this last year. Often in ways that we really didn't anticipate, and I think it has become a lot bigger than we anticipated, and has had much more of an impact than really we anticipated, which has been absolutely amazing, and is really down to the support from people like yourselves. I think obviously we can only do so much, and it's the fact that people have been so responsive and have got involved, and have kind of signal boosted and kind of joined the move that I think has really led to the position we're in now. And I think we're feeling quite confident really about the future of the campaign, as you'll see as we go through the slides. So I just wanted to start off really a little bit by kind of setting the scene as to, how we actually really started out. And it was very much something born from the pandemic. I think these issues around ebooks, around pricing, around availability, around accessibility and kind of license restrictions, none of it was new. It had been an issue for years, really, as long as we've had library ebooks. But I think the pandemic really brought all the issues to a head, because for the first time we were really 100% reliant on ebooks. My library closed, Rachel's library closed, probably many other libraries around the world closed. And so we couldn't give access to all of those print resources that had really been that kind of fallback position for us. If we couldn't get an ebook of something, we would just buy more print copies. And then suddenly that really wasn't an option anymore. Our users, our staff, our students were 100% reliant on our print resources. And that really kind of brought into focus all of these issues. And all of these barriers really that were in the way of us providing the material that we wanted to our users and our community. And that's when we really just got fed up. You know, to quote a very famous movie, you know, we were mad as hell and we weren't going to take it anymore. And that's when we really kind of got together, you know, got our heads together and just thought, can we do anything about this? Can we raise these issues at any kind of, you know, governmental or legislative level? Can we get people paying attention to this? Because I think, you know, and I speak for myself as a librarian, but I suspect you'll probably all agree with me that librarians are very good at hiding our labour. We're very good at papering over the cracks of the systems that we work with, and we're very good at making things look easy. And I think, you know, with ebooks, I think the vast majority of our users really had no idea of these issues. You know, even now I still get people saying, can you make this available as an ebook? And I think, oh, if only. And so I think a lot of our users were just not aware of these issues. And so if people in that kind of library world, that library community, weren't aware of the issues, it really wasn't something that was on anybody's radar outside of the library world. And we wanted to change that. So that's kind of where the open letter came from. And originally it was intended to be for the Education Select Committee here in the UK, basically calling for an investigation, calling for a governmental select committee to actually just take a look at this issue, as they do with many issues in the UK. You know, they will form select committees to start doing investigations. And so that was what we originally intended. We wanted to collect signatures. We wanted to kind of get a bit of groundswell of support to try and get this kind of investigation going into the practices of the academic publishing market. And it really kind of took off in a way that I don't think we really expected. Signatures suddenly started rolling in, you know, by, as you can see on the screen, you know, we had over 1,000 signatures by the first week. And that was students, it was staff, it was researchers, it was lecturers, it was librarians. You know, they were kind of coming in from all corners really, as people, I think, started to wake up to the issues and the ramifications of those issues. And it started to get more attention. Johanna was interviewed by the BBC. The three of us were interviewed by The Guardian. I wrote a piece for the Times Higher Education. And the Guardian article particularly got quite a lot of attention. It even trended on Reddit at one point as one of the kind of most commented on articles. Mostly students really talking about the difficulties of textbooks, you know, the prices that they were having to pay for print textbooks, you know, the unavailability of the online versions. So it really kind of took off in a way there that we had not anticipated. And then we kind of got brought back down to earth with a bit of a bump by the Education Select Committee, effectively saying they didn't have the capacity. They were too busy, basically, which was very, very disappointing. But we decided, you know what, screw them. And so we decided to carry on sort of, you know, moving things forwards. And so at that point, after we kind of, you know, hit that brick wall of the Education Select Committee, not saying that they weren't interested, just that they didn't have the capacity to take it on, we started thinking about, oops, my slides are going forwards without my consent. We decided to think about a sort of different approach. And then we decided to make a formal complaint to the Competition and Markets Authority. And for those of you who are not based in the UK, the CMA, the Competition and Markets Authority, is basically a non-ministerial government department that is designed to strengthen and encourage kind of competitive behaviour. It investigates what it considers to be unfair or unethical practice in businesses. It looks at, you know, business practice, mergers, kind of, you know, everything going on in the business world that might have a kind of undue impact or harm on the end consumer. So we thought, well, this absolutely is the academic publishing industry. You know, a publisher has a monopoly over their book. You can't really buy another version of that book if you need a particular title. The licenses make it very, very difficult to access, to actually exercise some of the rights that we have under copyright legislation. You know, the products are often not accessible. The pricing is extortionate in many cases. You know, quite frequently, you can't even buy an individual ebook. You can only buy it as part of a package. And bundling, as they call it, is something that they are very much frowned on in other kind of industries. So we thought making a formal complaint to them would be quite worthwhile. And so the campaign made a formal complaint. CILIP, the Librarian Association here in the UK, made a formal complaint. And a number of other sector bodies did as well after we kind of poked them quite a lot. And we've had quite a lot of communication with the CMA. They are currently still doing their own kind of internal investigations as to whether they are planning on launching an investigation or not. The noises that we have had from directors of the CMA have been very encouraging. They've been quite surprised by some of the practice, and I think it was definitely something that was new to them. They particularly were very interested in this bundling issue, which they said they very much frowned on with things like banks, of kind of bundling services or bundling sales together and forcing you to buy more than you need effectively. So we are still in constant communication with them, and occasionally they kind of drop in and out of various webinars and events that we've been doing to kind of collect information. We've also been continuing with the government approach. So we did meet with an advisor from the Department for Education who had been tasked with preparing a briefing for the Universities Minister. And we'd also kind of prompted some friendly MPs to ask questions of the Universities Minister about these issues. There were a number of formal questions put in the House of Commons. And when this kind of process happens, the minister in question is obliged to provide a response. So we did get some responses from the Universities Minister to some of those questions. And her response, let's be diplomatic, quite frankly demonstrated a complete woeful lack of understanding of the issues, and spent quite a lot of time talking about the resources that the government had put in place for schools, which, when the Universities Minister is talking, is an interesting approach. She also kind of displayed quite a lack of understanding of copyright legislation, and we did have a copyright expert actually kind of respond to her on our blog, which is quite a fun read, quite damning, if you want to take a look at that. So we were a little bit disappointed in that kind of government response. But at that point, it wasn't really as disheartening as it could have been, because the campaign had started to go kind of global. So very much inspired by our open letter and our approach, the Library Association of Ireland released a statement basically supporting the campaign, supporting the goals of the campaign, and calling on the Irish government to launch a similar kind of investigation. Now, we haven't really heard very much more about that, but we have been in kind of constant contact with various representatives from the Library Association of Ireland, and they are really, really supportive. And we continued to kind of go global in terms of getting the message out there, presenting at conferences. So Johanna, for example, was the keynote at a copyright conference in Canada. She also spoke recently at the Charleston Library Conference that, you know, perhaps some of you were attending at. And I think a lot of these kind of global opportunities really highlighted just how universal this issue is. It is very much not something that is restricted to the UK. You know, the publishers that we are dealing with, the practices that we are dealing with are, you know, completely international. We are all struggling with the same issues. And so I think that really kind of impelled us to start taking a more international outlook and trying to kind of raise awareness and build partnerships and bridges with international organisations that really had the same kind of goal. So we've started to work with Library Futures, which is a US-based coalition of kind of libraries, sector organisations, museums, kind of copyright organisations to really call for change, call for reform, call for copyright reform. And so it's really starting to become very much a kind of global campaign in a way that I don't think any of us had really anticipated last year when we just started drafting our initial kind of open letter. And it's been absolutely amazing in that sense. So I'm handing over to Rachel now. So you will have to bear with me while we now fight for control of the slides.
Okay, so to talk about things we were doing in addition to everything Caroline's just talked about, so as well as sort of pushing for an investigation, we're also looking at what librarians and other HE staff can actually do within that current situation, because we were in that situation where our students needed access to resources, and any kind of investigation, you know, is going to be a very long process. So we started thinking about, you know, different things that we could suggest, different things that maybe we needed to be considering as librarians. Last May, we presented at the Critical Approaches to Libraries conference, CALC, which was a fantastic conference. I'm sure a lot of you have been to it. So we actually talked more about the need for critical collection development. So really putting forward the idea that we need to move from sort of process-focused collection development policies more to policies that are shaped by ethics and awareness of sector issues and drivers and processes within that. So we suggested questions that librarians could be asking themselves in terms of, you know, are our collection development policies critical? Are they ethical? Are they sustainable? Which of course is really important as well. And some universities have already been thinking about that. So, you know, at the time we did our presentation, we'd found a few collection development policies that had been updated. The University of Sheffield, for example, had a fantastic one where they were prioritising open access and publishers who are behaving in an ethical way as part of their collection development policies. And I know other university libraries have been starting to do that too. And similarly, in May, we had a fantastic small group of volunteers get together. So there's a copyright expert, I think a librarian, editor from a OA publisher, and I've missed someone else, a lecturer, I think, who got together and created a guide for academics and researchers and lecturers called "Can My Students Read My Books?" Which often academics and lecturers are finding no, their students can't read their books in e-format because we can't get them. So this guide offers an explanation of the situation and also, you know, questions that academics can ask of the publishers when they're deciding who to publish with and when they're sorting out terms of a contract. And this is a great guide. It's on our web pages, but it can be used or adapted by anyone. So at my institution, we've adapted it and we have our own version of it in what's called the staff zone in the intranet for academic staff. So we were doing that kind of work as well. And then also getting into the publishing world. So while responses from the big names were very vague and dismissive whenever they tried to sort of respond to things we were saying about, you know, how we couldn't buy ebooks, how it was too expensive, how the bundling wasn't ethical, you know, the big names were very dismissive, sort of implying that we didn't really know what we were talking about. But, you know, there are other areas of the publishing world who were interested in what we were doing and completely on board with what we were doing as well. So open access publishers and smaller publishers as well, which we found were in many cases behaving in a more ethical way. So we got involved in a few ways that way as well. So in March, I co-authored an article with Lucy Barnes, who is an editor at Open Book Publishers, for a publication called Research Fortnight, where we both put forward from our own experience and from our own ideas, how we envisaged that open access could really be the thing to shake up the academic ebook publishing world. And again, in May, Johanna was on a panel about ebookSOS at the Independent Publishers Guild conference. And I know she got quite a few sort of emails and inquiries from publishers after that, sort of, I think, wanted to check that they were okay and just sort of, you know, appreciating the situation we were in and wanting to be able to work with librarians and make sure that ebooks were accessible. And then more recently, we have been shortlisted. The campaign has been shortlisted for an Open Publishing Award. And I've just realised I've written reward, not award. So I missed that in my proofreading. So award. So these awards, they celebrate software and content in publishing that's open, but they're also very much about recognising the strategic value of openness, which obviously is one thing that, as I said, we've been sort of talking about as part of the campaign. And we are also taking part in the Open Publishing Fest as part of that, which is ongoing at the moment. So I think we'll tell you about that in a little while. So we have been involved in the publishing world that way as well. And then something else we've been observing as we go along and in many cases being involved with, there's a number of different conversations happening in the different worlds, in the library and information world, but also more generally in the higher education world, in the worlds of digital content, publishing, content creation, etc. There are more conversations about moving away from maybe traditional methods of licensing and making content available and looking at alternatives for licensing resources. So we've put the top there. Last year, again, we were in this situation where we were right in the middle of the pandemic. The library sites were closed, so the students were having to rely on open access, on ebook material. And so some librarians, including some of us, sort of got together and crowdsourced shared spreadsheets of really good open access research methods, books and other online resources that we'd found that we could share with our dissertation students who were trying to get their final projects done during this kind of situation. There's also been conversations about controlled digital lending as well. So if anyone's not quite sure what CDL is, I've just copied down the definition from this IFLA position on controlled digital lending that I've mentioned there, that was published in June. So CDL essentially is the idea that libraries should be able to lend out digitized copies of works in their collections on a strict owned to loaned ratio. So it applies to the lending of digital copies of in-copyright works. And this lending is controlled through the use of technological protection resources or measures, which prevent illicit copying and limit the length of loan periods. So CDL is essentially libraries being able to loan out digitally anything that they have in print, giving them that choice. So IFLA in June 2021, so a few months ago, released their position on CDL, which really links this position that they've taken to the issue of ebooks. So they actually say in this that licensed ebooks have opened the door to a radical undermining of the traditional public interest functions and freedoms of libraries. And it's also important to note that this statement is very much driven by Ben White, who is a very valued member of the ebookSOS team. So he does lots of stuff. I was trying to write down all the things he does, and he does loads of different things. So he's a PhD researcher, but he's also co-founder of Knowledge Rights 21, which advocates for a 21st century copyright environment across Europe that is useful for everybody and that allows access to materials and is good for education. And he's also has advisory positions, including to IFLA. So Ben very much had a hand in driving the release of that position, which was really good to see. And then something else we observed as well, very recently, Creative Commons have released position papers on several aspects of licensing and making content open. So we popped a link in the slides there. They're very well worth having a read as well. So there are all of these different conversations also going on about how, not just in terms of ebooks, but in general, how perhaps we can start to break away from these traditional licensing and publishing models. Support from the sector. This took a while. At first, it was very much driven by us, and a lot of kind of senior figures and organisations were, for whatever reasons, very reluctant to kind of really strongly get behind us, to put names to the open letter, to make statements that they would support what we were doing, what we were calling for. So it really was amazing that what happened in October did. So during the summer, Caroline joined a working group with representatives across the sector. And what has come out of that is this joint statement on ebook and e-textbook content. And it represents the position of, and has been signed off by a range of bodies across the sector. So the SCONL, JISC, CILIP, the National Acquisitions Group, Research Libraries UK, and then APUC and SUPC are publishing consortia in the UK, and as well as us as well. So this statement's on our web pages. It consists of several documents. It calls for immediate action by publishers and aggregators to introduce more sustainable and affordable pricing models for ebooks and e-textbooks. And it pledges the signatory bodies to work towards a fairer and more transparent marketplace, so that students are getting equitable and sustainable access to ebooks and e-textbooks. And as well as the statement, there are other documents there as well, including a position paper on sustainability. And there's a JISC briefing for library directors about publishers and the textbook market. And there's also a JISC briefing for academic staff as well, which really highlights to them the issues around cost, affordability, availability of core reading materials. And as I've put there, the briefing paper to library directors also includes direct encouragement to support our CMA submission. So there really is a direct call to support the action that we are taking. So that was absolutely fantastic to see. Okay, I think I'm handing back over to you, Caroline. Yep.
Yep. So that is kind of a summary of what we've been up to, really, over the last sort of, gosh, it's only been a year and a half, really. It actually feels like a lot longer. So as I said, sort of right at the start, I don't think we really could have anticipated the way the campaign has evolved, the things that have come out of it, the partnerships we've forged, and, you know, as much as it would be great to be able to take credit for it all, I think it is really only because these issues have just resonated so much with so many people across so many different sectors. And one of the things that we have been trying very hard to do as we kind of progress is not lose sight of the other kinds of libraries that are affected by these issues. Obviously, Johanna and Rachel and myself are all academic librarians. You know, the vast majority of kind of sector support has very much come from academic library organisations. And we have been working to try and broaden that out of it and to try and make sure that whatever messages get out and whatever statements of support get out, we don't lose sight of, you know, school libraries, we don't lose sight of NHS libraries or law libraries or kind of special collections. You know, all of those different kinds of libraries are very much affected by it. And so if we, you know, if we do have any representatives from any of those kind of libraries, we would really welcome that kind of input, because we always worry as we go through that it's so academic library focused. And that is just purely really because that's where a lot of the support is coming from, and that is all we know really. So where we are at now is we're sort of in a little bit of a holding position at the moment. We are waiting to hear back from the CMA. They have absolutely not said no. They are still investigating internally. And that is one of the reasons why we were so pleased about the statement that's been put out by all of those various sector bodies, and that specifically addressed library directors and kind of VCs and heads of institutions, because the message we were kind of getting from our contacts at the CMA was that, you know, pressure being put on them helps. You know, letters being sent to the sort of the main director of the CMA, supporting the campaign, supporting the investigation, is the kind of pressure that really demonstrates to them that there is harm being done here, that there is real, you know, harm being done to the end consumers, and that there is widespread support for an investigation like this. So that kind of approach from all of those sector bodies was really, really gratifying, and hopefully will really help put that pressure on, but we need it to continue. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment now is still kind of trying to whip up that support, trying to encourage, you know, important people to write to the CMA. So, you know, heads of organisations, heads of GLAM institutions, you know, NHS, NUS, you know, basically whoever we can think of. We've managed to rally, I think, 2 members of the House of Lords and a few MPs. So we're you know, constantly just looking for people that we can buttonhole, basically. So that's happening with the CMA, and we're hoping to hear back from them in the new year, sometime around February, I believe. We haven't had any follow-up from the government, which, as we all know with our experience of governments, is probably not surprising. And I think particularly the UK government probably has its hands full with mismanaging Brexit and COVID. So I think we might be grateful that they might not be paying attention to this issue at the moment. And we are still kind of accruing signatures, very much to the open letter. You know, every single signature helps us to demonstrate the impact that these issues are having on, you know, students, on researchers, on lecturers, you know, that those barriers being put in the way of accessing knowledge. And we recently had a little ebookSOS video, which some of you may have seen on Twitter. It went a little bit viral, or as viral as things go in the library world, I think. And if I do say so myself, because I did make it. But if you're interested in that, the link is in the slides, and we will be sharing the slides as well. So we've been kind of still working on getting the message out there, encouraging that support. But, you know, as I said, we are kind of in the position at the moment of waiting to hear back about the success of some of these ventures. Oops, going backwards, not forwards. Don't want to go backwards. So this is kind of what we're working on. We're working on building that groundswell of support. We're working on continuing to send evidence of harm and encouragement for the investigation to the Competition and Markets Authority. And we are very much kind of looking for you know, contact people to approach. You know, if any of you have connections with, you know, sector organizations, heads of institutions that can send letters on behalf of the campaign and supporting the investigation, this is something we are looking for all the time. And we are working at the moment to kind of build those international partnerships. To build more links with kind of similar campaigns that might be taking place around the world. So at the moment, we're very aware of the Irish campaign. We're very aware of a lot of the work that's being done in the US, particularly around kind of pressing for controlled digital lending. So we are very much kind of working to build that support, you know, to partner with other institutions, to partner with other kind of organizations, and really make it clear that this is a global issue. It's not something that's going to go away, and that we really, really need to kind of keep pressing forwards for it. Now I think I'm handing back to Rachel here, so we may have to fight over the slides again.
There we go. I appear to be in control. Okay, so we touched on some of this already, but you know, if you want to get involved, if you want to help, these are just a few of the things that you can do. So we've said sign the open letter, ask colleagues, lecturers, students, anyone else to do so as well. So anyone who, you know, is affected by the situation, who's got an interest in the situation. We have a few kind of famous names on there as well. So if you know of any celebrities who might be interested in signing, please do, you know, send it their way on Twitter. We mentioned the joint statements and accompanying documents. You know, you can send those to senior library managers or to vice chancellors for those who work in universities, and that's really going to encourage them, hopefully, to support the campaign. And as we said, it's that kind of weight behind it that we really need. Our new video, it's a really fantastic, quick and easy introduction to the ebook issue. So, you know, for students, for academics, perhaps you can send them that, and then after they've watched that, you know, they'll think, oh, it's a really cute little video with like the little kind of cartoony dudes graduating at the end. So they, you know, might have questions after that, and it kind of really breaks it down to really easy to kind of understand what the issues are. UK residents, you know, ask your MP to try again with the Universities Minister or the Education Select Committee. You know, as Caroline said earlier, we did have success last year with MPs who were willing to raise the question and try and push it. So that's always worth continuing to do as well. So, you know, if you've got a good MP, if you've got a friendly MP who likes to support their constituents, then give it a go. You know, send them the link to our open letter and our web pages, and see if they'll be able to help us out, or anything else that you can think of to help. You know, we're always very happy to hear ideas. As Caroline said at the start, we've had you know, a lot of support from people. We've had help with people doing things like the guide for academics about whether students can read their book or not. So we really do appreciate any ideas, support, help. Volunteering we really appreciate as well. So, you know, anything else that you can think of, do get in touch with us and let us know what you're thinking. And then a little bit of breaking news for you. So we talked about earlier about international collaborations. So we have signed an international statement of solidarity with Library Futures, which is the US nonprofit that Caroline has mentioned already. So they're very focused on championing the right to equitable access to information and empowering libraries to be able to do that. So along with them and Knowledge Rights 21, who I've mentioned already, we have signed this international statement of solidarity, which isn't just about ebooks. It's more generally about challenging unfair licensing terms and the need to update copyright legislation to ensure that libraries do have options to provide access to material for everybody. So whether that's controlled digital lending or something else. So that has been released today. It is on the Library Futures website, and we put the link in the slides there. Signatures to the statement are invited from anyone in the world, and you can sign as an individual, or if you're on the position to sign on behalf of an institution or ask someone else to sign on behalf of an institution, you can also do that. So we've put the link in there, so please do go and have a read, and if you feel you would like to add your signature, then please do. And then just to finish off, really, we've sort of given a bit of a whirlwind overview of what we've done and what's coming up. So just to finish off, we just put our further information and contact details. So everything is on the website. So the open letter, the link to sign it, and news about things we've been doing, that's all on the campaign website. We've got an email address that you can use to get in contact with us. We do also have a JISC mail list. So any of you who are used to using JISC mail lists, if you'd like to join one on the topic of ebookSOS, that has had some really good conversations in the past, so you can join that as well. And we're really active on Twitter, so we use the ebookSOS hashtag. So please come on, join the conversation. If you found a really shocking example of ebook pricing or bundling, people will often pop those on with the hashtag as well. So please do come and join in on Twitter as well if you would like to. And I think that's all we sort of wanted to say, really. So I think we can move on to any questions or discussions anyone would like to have.
So we've been getting questions through, not surprisingly, people are very interested. And so I think the first one that's good to start with is somebody's asked if you could briefly recap the main issues. So they said that they heard that the prices are too high and there's the bundling problem and the lack of transparency and unavailability for libraries. Is there anything they missed or that we missed that we should bear in mind?
Those are the kind of main issues. I mean, you know, whenever I have an academic sort of getting in touch and saying, you know, can we get this as an ebook, I have a kind of standard template email that I sent back that effectively kind of says, well, it depends, and then has this whole list of, has the publisher actually made it available for libraries to purchase, which is the first kind of big issue. And I think a recent Sconnell survey that was undertaken in the last couple of years here in the UK, I think found out that something like only 10% of academic texts were actually available as ebooks for libraries to purchase. So it's quite common sometimes that either the publisher has just not made it available at all for anyone, or sometimes it's only for individuals. And I think that can confuse quite a lot of lecturers because they go, well, it's on the publisher's website, and we have to go, yeah, but not for us to buy. So I think whether it's available at all is a huge issue. Then I think when they are available, sometimes publishers will bundle them up. So Johanna always describes it as having to buy the entirety of the Waterstones bookstore in order to buy one or two books. But it can be quite common for you know, ebooks to be bundled up in packages of hundreds or thousands of ebooks, quite a lot of which are often quite old. We had a package recently that when we started assessing it, at least a quarter of the texts in there were actually out of copyright. That's how old they were. So it can be very frustrating when there are books that you want to buy that you literally can't buy as individual titles. Then when they are available as individual titles, sometimes they can be priced enormously highly. I had one the other day that was £16,000 for 1 year's access to a business textbook. And sometimes the licenses are very, very restrictive. So only one person at a time can access it. And then there's a whole bunch of different models depending on what the publisher has decided. So you can have the same book available via different platforms with different prices, with different licenses. So those are really the kind of main issues, I think. Just the sheer complexity of the market and the complete kind of lack of any sort of rational approach to pricing. And one of the things that we didn't mention is the way that publishers can just arbitrarily change the prices. You know, you can have a book that you maybe bought last year that you think, oh, well, we want to get another copy of that because it's only a 3-user license and now we've got more students. And you can go and find that the price has increased by 1,000% in the course of a year. And in fact, one of the things that really impelled us to start this campaign was the fact that we noticed many publishers were putting prices up during the pandemic. We're taking advantage of the fact that we were 100% reliant on ebooks, and so took advantage of that and put the prices up. And unsurprisingly, those prices have not come down again. But also with things like bundling, the fact that a lot of suppliers reserve the right to remove 10% of the package twice a year. So this is quite common with a lot of bundles that we get from like EBSCO and places like that, where twice a year you can suddenly lose access to these ebooks that you had perhaps purchased that bundle for those ebooks. And then they often give you the option to buy them back individually, but it usually costs more. So it's all of these kind of just really unethical practices, you know, completely unregulated practices, which is part of the issue, that really make it so kind of complicated, and why we just got completely fed up and thought, you know, this doesn't happen with print books. I want a print book, I've got the ISBN, I give it to our acquisitions team, job done. You know, we don't have to look across 17 different platforms and weigh up 12 different licenses and have, you know, 4 different pricing schemes and 17 different kinds of licenses. And, you know, it doesn't need to be that complicated. And I think that is one of the things that we really recognize, that this industry is not going to regulate itself. You know, publishers are not going to suddenly drop their prices because they haven't for journals, so why would they for ebooks? And that's when we really kind of got to the point where we thought, we need that outside look at this. We need that external regulation, because this industry is not going to regulate itself.
I will just share, I once held an art history department's budget, and I bought a key text that was based mostly on pictures as an ebook at their request, and none of the pictures were in the book because of copyright. I'm just like, for goodness sake. But moving on to more questions. Also, somebody's asked if you have any crucial tips for setting up a campaign in, they say, our respective countries. So elsewhere, if you're starting this campaign somewhere else.
Oh, that is a good question. I think gathering as much support as you can from other librarians is really important. So maybe that is using Twitter, just to kind of keep you sane some days, when you maybe feel like you're not getting very far. If you've got other people around you who are sort of feeling the same, and it's sort of, you know, it shows you that it really is kind of worth doing it, essentially. So I would say make use of our hashtag as well, and or set your own up on Twitter. So really be in that social media sphere to really connect with other people. What else? What other tips?
Doing as much as you can publicly, I think, is really important, because it kind of really helps to demonstrate the impact and the level of support that's there. So one of the things that really helped us was, you know, the open letter, and being able to demonstrate, you know, here are all the people signing, here are some of the big names, here are some of the institutions. I think that really helped. I mean, ideally, there would be leadership from sector bodies in your own countries. You know, ideally, this would be something that would be driven by those sector bodies. It was something that we were not finding in the UK, and they've very much got on board now, which is good. But I think, you know, in an ideal world, it would be more like the Irish Library Association, which was very much kind of leading from the top. Ours is very much more bottom up, which is useful in demonstrating that groundswell of support to kind of get sector leaders to pay attention. So I think it very much depends on the kind of proactiveness, really, of your library institutions, of your academic institutions, of whatever kind of sector bodies exist in your respective countries. Some of them are very responsive, you know, will very much take on this issue and kind of drive it forwards themselves. Others are maybe a little bit more dilatory. So I think it's very much something that's going to be unique to those individual countries. You know, Ireland just kind of went on it straight away, and we were a bit like, oh, that's nice. So I do think making connections with people in kind of sector organizations, consortia, you know, library associations, because they have levels of access that we don't necessarily have. So we found it really helpful when SLIP, the library association here in the UK, got involved, because then Nick Paul, the CEO of that, you know, he had contacts that we didn't necessarily have. He had sort of government contacts that he could pull on. You know, his voice had a weight that ours didn't really, as kind of, you know, junior librarians. So I think that is really something that can help. And I think, you know, if Johanna was here, I would very much be pointing to her and saying, be arsey, be argumentative, be stubborn, you know, don't take no for an answer, you know, buttonhole people, tweet random strangers, you know, just really irritate people if you have to in getting your message out there, because I think so often with our campaign, we've made connections and we've had opportunities that we probably wouldn't have had if we didn't have Johanna on board, because she's definitely more kind of proactive than well, maybe not proactive, but she's just fearless basically in a way that I don't think Rachel and I are. So she really just buttonholes people and has absolutely no shame in it, and I think that's amazing, because that kind of direct approach actually has pays off in most cases. It really does. So I would just say, don't be afraid, be direct, be confident, reach out, send emails to total strangers, aim high. The worst people can say is no, and then you're back where you started from. So that would be my kind of number one tip, really. Be arsey.
Another question that follows on from your mention of the library associations is, are any large library consortia supporting the campaign?
So the joint statement, which also calls for support of the CMA submission, so that includes SCONL, which now it's going to test my memory of what it stands for, but it's the Society for College, National and University Libraries. I think that's what it stands for. So that's a sort of an organisation of a lot of different educational libraries in the UK. There's also Research Libraries UK as well that have signed up to it, and then 2 publishing consortia as well.
Oops. Unmute myself.
I would also say in kind of add on to sort of about setting up your own campaign is very much and someone, Jane, I think, has mentioned it in the chat about trying to get proposals into conferences. I've spoken at more conferences this last year than any other year, and that's been a really useful way of getting messages out there, both library conferences and other kinds of conferences, because not everyone's on social media, not everyone is on Gmail and things like that. So particularly getting out to academics and things like that have been really useful. So conferences, definitely. The challenge can be obviously budgets. Some conferences don't expect presenters to pay, some do, but definitely kind of putting pitches out there, that's another way of getting sector support as well.
Have your employers been supportive while you've been doing this campaign?
I would say my library managers have been really supportive. So my manager, who is the head of library resources, signed up to the open letter even before he actually knew I was one of the people behind it. So we have had, I've had a lot of sort of support personally from the library managers. I've not really been able to get through to the university senior management. I was asked to produce a briefing paper for them after the Guardian article, which mentioned me by name and my institution, but I've not really heard anything back from that. So at a library management level, very supportive, but I haven't quite got there with the university senior management level.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think my institution have been kind of, I wouldn't go so far as to say supportive, but I would say not unsupportive. They've kind of left me to get on with it, really. There hasn't been any issues about, it distracting me from my day job. There hasn't been any issues about, me promoting this to academics. So in that sense, I suppose they've been supportive. I'm kind of in the fortunate position at the moment that we've been sort of going through a bit of an extended restructure, and I currently don't actually have a manager, and the position above who would be my manager is vacant, and we also only have a temporary head of service. So there's a little bit of vacuum of management going on above me, which kind of means I've just gone rogue, basically. So it'll be interesting when those positions get filled and suddenly people start telling me what to do. I'll be a bit like, what? But it has kind of given me the freedom to operate, and I think in some respects they've been quite pleased with it, really. I think it kind of raises the profile of the institution for us to be working at this kind of level, and I think you know, the connections that we've been able to make through this work, I think, have benefited our institutions in other ways, really. So I think that's something that they've not been immensely against. You know, I think if it started to take up too much of our time, things might be said. But I think we're all, I think, well, academic librarians in general, I think, are very good at multitasking. So we've been managing to kind of keep it all going, really.
Somebody else has asked if anyone is anyone graphing the price and license fluctuations by subject area, such as like business and law, or by publisher.
I think that would be something we would love to see happening. I don't think, certainly I don't have the expertise to do anything like that, and probably not the time either. So if anyone asking is volunteering, but you know, that kind of work is something we are very much reliant on kind of volunteers and other people outside of the kind of core campaign organisers to support with. I run in fear of Excel and spreadsheets and graphs and things, if I'm totally honest.
We do have, I don't think we mentioned it earlier, but, you know, since we started the campaign, we have had a sort of Google spreadsheet where people have been contributing anonymously examples of prices from different publishers. So we do have, we've got a link on our web pages for that. So we do have this kind of spreadsheet of lots of different data, but as Caroline said, we don't think any of us have that expertise to do that kind of graphing of it. And I would echo that it would be amazing if somebody would like to volunteer to do it.
So that anticipates another question that we just got about what your experience is with publicly sharing pricing information from proprietary platforms like Oasis. So you sort of touched on that, but
this one's been a bit interesting because, I mean, personally, I haven't had any pushback on this. We have heard secondhand from various heads of sector organisations that publishers have mentioned their concerns about this. We have heard sort of rumours of publishers not liking the fact that we have been collecting this information. You know, they do view it as proprietary information. They do view it as kind of, you know, violating terms and conditions and things. We haven't had any formal pushback on that, though, and I think in some respects, I think the campaign has got the visibility and the size now that I don't think they'd probably risk it. This was very much something we were hearing when we were first starting out with the campaign, because setting up this kind of crowdsourced spreadsheet was almost one of the first things we did, alongside the open letter. And at that point, we were kind of getting rumblings from publishers who had been in contact with some of the sort of sector heads to say they didn't like this, they were considering legal options, but it did all go quiet. I think mainly because it was all anonymous. They wouldn't have been able to prove where the information came from. And as I said, as the campaign got more and more visibility, I think it would have been quite counterproductive for them and would have given us much more ammunition, quite frankly, for the CMA, if the publishers had been stopping us from sharing this kind of information, because it very much reinforces our argument that this is anti-competitive behaviour. So I think they probably thought better of it. So we haven't had any formal pushback on that.
And that's exactly why we set up the spreadsheet in a way that it could be anonymous. Like Caroline said, at first we were more concerned with that, but yeah, it hasn't come to anything.
I'm sorry to have to wrap this up, but we're really running out of time. And so I want to thank you so very much for this incredibly fascinating and exciting and inspiring session. And I've learned a lot, and it's I really appreciate your time this evening to talk to us all about this. So I'd like to thank you again so much, Rachel and Caroline, for sharing your update and educating us on what's going on, and keep fighting the good fight here. So
Yeah, thank you everybody for coming. It's been fantastic to see so many people here.
Yeah, and thank you for asking us. It's been great. And And if anyone does have any questions, if anyone does want to get in touch, absolutely do. We are more than happy to lend whatever expertise we can, whatever guidance we can, and kind of really get this movement going global, really.
Okay, so thank you.